9 peoples, separated by oceans, by deserts, by thousands of years. Not one of them had ever heard of the others. And every single one of them told the same story. A child is born wrong, too early, too strong, too divine. Something breaks, and he is called into it. A teacher hands him a weapon that is not quite a weapon, a task that should kill him, a darkness he walks into on purpose, and a return that changes nothing in the world except him. A Sumerian king pressed into wet clay 4,000 years ago. A Greek strongman doing penance for something he can never undo. An Irish boy who fought an entire army alone at 17. A Geat who sailed to Denmark to grapple a thing in the dark. A Norseman who tasted a dragon's blood. A prince of Ayodhya, revered as God by hundreds of millions of living people, right now, today. A Pacific demigod, a Japanese boy born inside a peach, and a king of Mali who spent 7 years unable to walk. Different gods, different weapons, different centuries, and one skeleton lying underneath every last one of them. Nobody has ever fully explained why. In 1949, a scholar named Joseph Campbell gave that skeleton a name. He called it the monomyth. The hero, he said, has 1,000 faces. 1,000 faces, but only one story. That claim made him famous. It may also be wrong. Folklorists have spent 70 years explaining in detail exactly why, and yet something is still there. Something keeps repeating across cultures that never met. By the end of this, you will see precisely where the pattern holds and the exact moment it snaps. So start where they all start, not with a sword, with a birth that goes wrong. Uruk, in the land between 2 rivers. The oldest long story humanity still possesses. Its king was Gilgamesh, and the tablets do not call him a man. They call him 2/3 god, 1/3 human, which is not how fractions work. That is exactly the point. He is too much. Too strong, too beautiful, too cruel for the city that made him. Uruk does not celebrate its hero. Uruk complains about him. He is the city's greatest asset and its worst problem. Now go west and forward 1,000 years into Greece. A child is born to a mortal woman named Alcmene. His father is Zeus. His stepmother, the Queen of Heaven, is not amused. Hera sends 2 serpents into the nursery at night. The infant strangles one in each fist and goes back to sleep. Before he can walk, the world has already tried to kill him. That is the birth announcement of Heracles. Ireland. A woman named Dictine bears a son, and the god Luf claims the boy as his own. They name him Setanta. He is small, he is beautiful, and he is a catastrophe waiting to be provoked. He will be called Chulainn. Norse ground now, cold and iron gray. Sigurd is born after his father is already dead on the battlefield. A posthumous son, laid beside the shards of his father's shattered sword. He inherits nothing at all, except pieces. Japan. An old couple, childless and poor. A giant peach comes bobbing down the river toward them. They cut it open to eat it, and a boy sits up inside. He tells them the gods have sent him as their son. Mali, Sogolon, the woman they called the Buffalo Woman, bears a son to the king. And the son does not walk, not at 3, not at 5, not at 7. The court laughs at him. His mother is humiliated in public. The greatest king in West African memory begins his story crawling in the dust in front of everybody who matters. In the Pacific, a child is born far too early, wrapped in a knot of his mother's hair and thrown into the sea. The ocean itself refuses to keep him. He washes back, and that boy will one day fight the goddess of death. And in India, in Ayodhya, Rama is born. Hindus revere him as an avatar of Vishnu, God descended into a human life. That is not a folk tale to be graded. It is living scripture, recited, sung, and lived by hundreds of millions of people today. Look at them together. One birth is divine. One is a piece of fruit. One is a pair of legs that will not work. But not one of them is ordinary. Not a single one of these heroes arrives quietly, and none of them is allowed a normal childhood. Here is what the pattern is actually telling you. The strange birth is not decoration, it is a debt. It marks the child as owing something enormous, and sooner or later the world always comes to collect. Which is the second beat, the call. Something tears open and the hero is summoned into the gap. For Gilgamesh, the call arrives as a friend. The gods build a wild man, Enkidu, to be his equal and his leash. They fight. Neither one wins. And then, absurdly, they love each other. Together, they become unstoppable. They march into the cedar forest and kill its guardian. They kill the bull of heaven when the goddess Ishtar sends it against the city. And the gods, insulted twice, decide that one of the two friends has to die. It is not going to be the king. Enkidu sickens. 12 days. And Gilgamesh sits and watches the only person he has ever loved stop breathing. That is the real call. Not glory, grief. A king staring at a corpse, suddenly understanding that he will rot too. The Greek call is uglier. Hera sends madness down on Heracles, and in that madness he kills his own wife and children. He wakes in the wreckage of his own house. The oracle at Delphi tells him what the cleansing is going to cost. Serve a lesser man. Do whatever he asks for years. That is the price of what you did while you were not yourself. The mightiest hero in Greece is not on an adventure. He is doing penance. Never lose sight of that. In Ireland, the call is a sentence, and the boy walks into it with his eyes wide open. The druid Cathbad declares that any warrior who takes up arms on that particular day will win everlasting fame and a very short life. The boy hears the word fame. He also hears the word short, and he decides it is a fair trade. He takes up arms that day. He is a child. He has just chosen the manner of his own death. That may be the most honest line in any hero myth on earth. Everything glorious has a price. The price is your life. In Denmark, a great mead hall called Heorot has stood silent for 12 winters because something comes to it in the night. Across the sea, a young Geat named Beowulf hears about it and decides a stranger's nightmare is his business. Nobody sends him. No god curses him. He simply hears that other people are suffering and gets into a boat. In Mali, messengers ride out into exile to find a crippled prince because a sorcerer king has swallowed their homeland whole. And in Ayodhya, an old promise of his father's falls due, and Rama is exiled for 14 years on the eve of his crowning. He does not argue. He does not delay. He goes because duty is the entire meaning of who he is. Campbell insisted that every hero first refuses the call. Look at Rama, and the theory already cracks down the middle. Rama accepts instantly. And in his tradition, that instant obedience is precisely what marks him as divine. The refusal was never universal. Third beat. Somebody hands the hero an object, and the object changes what he is. In Ireland, the boy sails away to a warrior woman called Scathach, who trains the men that nobody else will train. She teaches him everything she knows. Then she teaches him one thing more, a barbed spear called the Geabog. It enters a body as a single point and opens inside it into 30. There is no counter to it and no honor in it. Notice the pattern forming already. The teacher gives the hero the very thing that will eventually damn him. In the north, Sigurd is raised by Regin, a smith with the patience of a man who has been waiting a very long time. Regin cannot kill the dragon himself, so he forges a boy instead. He hammers the shards of Sigurd's dead father into a sword called Gram, and then he points that boy at the cave. The mentor is not kind. The mentor has an agenda. Hold on to that. In India, the sage Vishvamitra leads the young Rama into the forest and grants him celestial weapons. A guru in the truest sense, not a trainer of hands. A man who forms the soul first and arms it second. In Mali, the boy who cannot walk is given a griot, a keeper of memory, a living archive named Balafaseke, not a blade, a voice. In West Africa, the hero's most dangerous weapon is his own story told correctly. And when he finally rises, he calls for a rod of iron and bends it double, hauling himself upright on it. Iron forged by a smith in a story whose villain is a smith king. The tradition knows exactly what it is doing. In Japan, the supernatural aid is an old woman with a bag of millet dumplings. That is all Momotaro is given. And with those dumplings he hires a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant. It sounds like a joke. It is not. It is the same beat, told by a culture with a sense of humor, payment, companions, and a road out of the village. Heracles is the outlier. He has music teachers and archery teachers, and he kills one of them with a lyre in a fit of temper. Some heroes are handed a tool. Some heroes are the tool. Campbell's tidy supernatural aid is doing a lot of shoving here. Now the part everybody remembers, the impossible task, and the most famous list in all of Western myth, 12 labors. Ask anyone on the street, but the 12 are far messier than the poster suggests. The Nemean lion, whose hide no blade could cut. The Hydra of Lerna, growing 2 heads for every single one struck off. The Ceryneian hind. The Erymanthian boar. The stables of Augeas, 30 years deep in filth. The Stymphalian birds. The Cretan bull. The man-eating mares of Diomedes. The belt of the Amazon queen. The cattle of Geryon. The golden apples of the Hesperides. And Cerberus, the hound of the dead, dragged up last of all. 12. Except that Eurystheus, the small king he served, threw 2 of them out on appeal. The Hydra did not count, he ruled, because Heracles' nephew held the torch that seared the stumps shut. The stables did not count either, because Heracles accepted payment for the job. So 2 more tasks were added on. The mightiest hero in Greece got audited, on a technicality, by a bureaucrat with a grudge. And the famous list is far later than you think. It was fixed by poets and by sculptors, centuries after the tales began. 12 happens to be a very convenient number when your temple has 12 carved panels waiting to be filled. The myth was fitted to the architecture. Remember that. We are about to meet a scholar who fitted the myths to a shape too. In Denmark, the impossible task walks through the door on its own 2 legs. Grendel has emptied Heorot for 12 winters. Warriors bed down in the hall at night. Nothing walks out in the morning. Beowulf puts down his sword. He will not use a weapon against a thing that carries none. He waits in the black hall. And when it comes, he takes it by the arm, and he does not let go. The benches tear loose from the floor. The hall shudders on its foundations. and the creature leaves its arm behind and crawls away into the marsh to die. Here is what almost every retelling gets wrong. That is not the end of the story. That is the first third of it. Because the thing had a mother, and she comes the very next night for the man who did that to her son. And 50 years later, when Beowulf is an old and tired king, a dragon wakes. That one he does not survive. 3 fights spread across an entire human lifetime. Youth, maturity, and death. Beowulf is not one victory. It is a whole arc of aging. In Ireland, the impossible task is simple arithmetic. 1 boy against the assembled army of a queen. The warriors of Ulster lie helpless under an ancient curse. Only he is exempt, because he is not fully one of them. So he stands at a river ford, invokes the law of single combat, and kills their champions one by one for months. He does not sleep. He does not stop. He fights his own foster brother across the water and weeps while he does it. He is 17 years old. In Japan, the task is an island of demons across the water. In Lanka, it is a fortress across the sea and a war for a stolen wife. In Mali, it is a sorcerer king that iron cannot cut, and the answer there is not strength at all. It is learning his secret. Every culture agrees the hero must face something that should not be survivable, and every culture disagrees completely about what that thing is. Here the pattern shows its darkest hinge. To defeat the monster, the hero has to become one. The Irish even have a word for it. The riostrad, the warp spasm, the battle frenzy that unmakes him from the inside out. When the rage takes him, his body turns inside out. His shape stops being a shape at all. One eye sinks back into his skull. The other stands out on his cheek. A dark column rises from his crown. In that state, he cannot tell friend from enemy. His own people must plunge him into barrels of cold water to bring him back. He is the weapon that saves Ulster. He is also the thing that Ulster is quietly, permanently terrified of. Heracles has the identical disease and no word for it. His rage destroys his family, and no barrel of cold water is coming. Sigurd's transformation is stranger and quieter. He kills the dragon Fafnir from a pit dug beneath its path. Then he burns his thumb on the beast's heart, puts it in his mouth, and the taste changes what he is. Suddenly he understands the language of birds, and the birds tell him his beloved mentor is planning to cut his throat. So the boy kills the men who raised him. The dragon was never the real danger. The teacher was. Campbell would file that under apotheosis, which is a remarkably calm word for eating a heart and killing your father figure. Now the stage he got right, the one that keeps surfacing no matter how much of his theory is disputed. The descent. Somewhere in the middle of every one of these stories, the hero goes down into the dark, deliberately, knowing what waits there. Heracles goes to Hades itself for the 12th labor and drags the 3-headed hound of the dead up into the sunlight. He is the only one who walks into death and walks back out of it holding a leash. Beowulf does not go down. He goes under, into a black mere where the dive itself takes most of a day. In the hall beneath that water, his sword fails him. The first time in his life a weapon has ever betrayed him. He finds an ancient blade on the wall, older than his own people, and finishes the fight with a giant's leftovers. The lesson is buried and blunt. What you brought will not be enough. The dark hands you what you need, or the dark keeps you. Sigurd's descent is a hole in the road. He lies in a trench beneath the dragon's belly, waiting in the dirt for the weight to pass over him. Momotaro sails to an island of demons. A children's story, that is, structurally, a voyage into hell and back. Rama's army raises a bridge across the ocean, and he crosses into a demon king's fortress to bring his wife home. And in the Pacific, the demigod crawls into the body of the goddess of death herself, trying to reverse birth and steal eternal life. But the deepest descent of all belongs to the oldest hero on the list. Gilgamesh, hollowed out by grief, walks the tunnel beneath the mountains where the sun travels at night. 12 leagues of absolute darkness. No light behind him, no light ahead of him, running until his lungs burn. He comes out into a garden of jewels, crosses the waters of death, and finds the one man the gods ever made immortal. And that man looks at him and says the thing every hero myth on earth is secretly afraid of. There is no immortality. There never was. You cannot even stay awake for a single week. And you want to live forever? That is a 4,000-year-old text telling you the truth to your face without blinking once. Every one of these heroes goes into the dark. What they carry back out of it is where the myths finally tear apart. Campbell says the hero returns with a boon, a gift for his people. This is where the theory stops surviving contact with the stories. Because Gilgamesh comes back with nothing at all. He does find one thing, a thorny plant on the seafloor that can make an old man young again. And he does not eat it. He will carry it home and share it with the old men of Uruk. It is the kindest thing he ever does. Then he stops to bathe in a cool pool. And a serpent slides up, takes the plant, and sheds its skin as it goes. He sits down and weeps. The oldest hero in literature, sitting on a riverbank, crying over a snake. Then he stands up and walks home and looks at the walls of his city. That is his boon. Not eternal life, a wall. Work that will outlast him. He fails completely, and the failure is the entire meaning of the poem. The Greek ending is a fire. Deianira sends her husband a shirt she believes is soaked in a love charm. It is soaked in poison. The Hydra's blood coming back for him decades late from the second labor of 12. He cannot tear it off. So he builds his own pyre on a mountain, lies down on it, and asks to be lit. The mortal half of him burns away, and the rest rises to join the gods. He does not survive. He is promoted. The Irish ending refuses even that comfort. Tricked into breaking his sacred taboos, mortally wounded, Chulainn will not lie down. He drags himself to a standing stone and lashes himself upright with his own belt, so that he dies on his feet, facing them. His enemies stand in a ring around him and do not dare come closer, until at last a carrion bird settles on his shoulder. That is how they know, not a physician, a crow. And he is only about 27 years old. He got the everlasting fame. He paid the short life. The bargain was honored to the letter, exactly as promised. Beowulf dies too, killing his dragon with one loyal boy beside him, while the rest of his warriors hide in the trees. The treasure he wins is buried with him, untouched and useless, and the poem closes by prophesying that his people are finished. The hero saves everyone. Then he dies. Then everyone dies anyway. That is the Anglo-Saxon idea of a gift. Sigurd gets no ending worthy of anything. Drugged into forgetting the woman he loved, he is murdered in his own bed. The greatest dragon slayer of the North, killed in his sleep by his own in-laws. The gold was cursed from the very first page. And then the pattern turns and walks off somewhere else entirely. Momotaro comes home, alive, with the treasure, a defeated demon chief, and 3 animals who followed him for a dumpling. His parents are still waiting. Nobody is cursed. Nobody is destroyed. The story ends with a family better off than before. In Mali, Sundiata wins his war at Kyrene, and then does something no Greek hero ever thinks to do. He gives his people a charter, obligations, protections, and an assembly with the standing to check the king himself. Read that again. In West Africa, the boon the hero carries back out of the dark is a constitution. In the Pacific, the demigod who crawled into the goddess of death is undone by a small bird that starts laughing. A fantail simply cannot hold it in. She wakes, and he becomes the reason that you and I are going to die. Even that is not tragedy in the Greek key. It is told with a grin, and the grin is part of the theology. Rama returns to Ayodhya after 14 years, and the whole city fills the darkness with rows of lamps to guide him home. Millions of people still light those lamps every autumn. That homecoming is not a story, it is a festival happening this year. So look honestly at what we actually have here. The Greek burns himself alive. The Irishman bleeds out standing up. The Norseman is stabbed in his sleep. The Sumerian fails and builds a wall. The Anglo-Saxon wins, and his nation dies with him anyway. The Japanese boy comes home to his parents. The Malian comes home with a code of law. The Polynesian dies laughing. And the Indian prince is not a man at the end of a journey at all. He is God, and the journey was for us. That is not one story. That is 9 civilizations arguing across 4,000 years about what a human life is actually for. Which brings us back, finally, to Joseph Campbell. The folklorists have been unkind to him, and they have had their reasons. Tolkien argued that Campbell built his monomyth by selecting the tales that fit, and quietly leaving out the ones that did not. Alan Dundes, one of the great folklorists of the last century, dismissed him as a non-expert and said the damage to serious study was real. Others put it more elegantly. Stress the differences as hard as the similarities, they warned, or you will end up with a Campbell soup of myths. A soup in which every local flavor dissolves into the same gray broth. And that is exactly the danger here. Flatten these 9 heroes into one shape, and you lose the only thing that ever made each of them matter. There is a bias problem, too. Nearly every figure in the model is male, and the pattern quietly assumes a hero who is free to leave. Campbell was not even first. Otto Rank published a hero pattern in 1909. Lord Raglan published another in 1936, and the monomyth's true home turned out to be Hollywood, not the university. Star Wars was built on it, deliberately, which raises an uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps the pattern feels universal because we have been fed it at 24 frames a second our whole lives. So is there nothing there at all? No. That is too easy, and it is not honest either, because something is genuinely repeating. Campbell did not invent it out of thin air. He overclaimed it. 3 explanations survive, and not one of them requires a mystical world soul or a memory buried in our blood. First, contact. Stories travel. Traders, armies, and migrations carried tales further and far earlier than we like to admit. Second, the shape of a life. Every society has children who must leave, be tested, and come back changed. Myth is that, made enormous. Third, memory. Before writing, a story had to be memorized or it simply died. Patterned stories survive, shapeless ones are forgotten. So the monomyth may not be a truth about the gods at all. It may be a truth about what a mind can carry across 1,000 years without a book. That is a much smaller claim. It is also a far better one because you can actually test it. Use Campbell as a lens, and you will see things you would otherwise walk straight past. Use him as a law, and you will bulldoze 9 civilizations into a single convenient shape. So keep the lens, and keep the differences, because the differences are where the people actually lived. Gilgamesh tells you to accept that you are going to die, and to build something anyway. Chulainn tells you a short blazing life can be worth more than a long quiet one, if you choose it with open eyes. Beowulf tells you to do the right thing even when the poem already knows your kingdom is doomed. Rama tells his devotees that duty, held perfectly and without complaint, is itself divine. Sundiata tells you the point of winning was never the winning. It is what you write into law afterwards. And a Pacific demigod, cut in half because a small bird could not stop laughing, tells you that death is not a punishment. It is the joke at the very center of being alive, and you are allowed to laugh at it, the same skeleton. 9 completely different souls. That is the honest answer. Not one story with 1,000 faces. 1,000 faces that happen, for reasons we still cannot fully explain, to have very similar bones.